Hello, my name is Dan McCabe.
And I'm Charlie Watts.
And we are the Global Engagement Associate Heads in the Faculty of Creative and Cultural Industries here at the University of Portsmouth.
Thank you for joining us today for our series of live talks, which have been hosted to celebrate our One World Festival.
And today's talk is being delivered by Dr. Megan Hoffman and Dr. Simon Hobbs. And we really hope you enjoy it.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Megan Hoffman. This is Dr. Simon Hobbs, and today we are going to be talking about TikTok activism and true crime. True crime is an area that we've published on quite a bit. We just had a book come out, actually, published by Palgrave Macmillan called Hashtag True Crime, Digital Culture, Ethics, and True Crime Audiences. And in that book, we sort of examine all the different kinds of ways that true crime shows up on social media. Now, true crime, you might think of as a pretty contemporary genre. You might think of, the latest Netflix series, as we see up here, or podcasts. But actually, true crime is really, really old. It's hundreds of years old. It sort of started, true crime as we know it, started as kind of murder ballads in the 17th and 18th century. And then moving into the 19th century, true crime became something that people read in newspapers. They read like sensational stories of Jack the Ripper. And that's when we started kind of getting the modern true crime narrative as we know it today. And then in the 20th century, we have things like Truman Capote's in Cold Blood, where we get this very fleshed out narrative following one specific crime and the people who committed it. And I think people have always been fascinated by crime and its legal and social ramifications, don't you, Simon?
I absolutely do, Megan. Yeah, thanks for that. Essentially, true crime is a very transmedial genre. It can just spread over any form. So now what we see is we see Netflix documentaries, as Megan mentioned. We've got podcasts. We've obviously still got true crime books, but also things on YouTube, TikTok, as we'll speak about today, even stuff like Instagram. It's a flexible genre that can be kind of bent to any medium. However, regardless of that flexibility in terms of how it's presented to its consumer and how it's consumed, most importantly, those ethical concerns, its representation has remained pretty stable. And the genre has been accused of being exploitative. It's been accused of being misogynistic. It's been accused of denying women's voice. It's been accused of being voyeuristic. And those ethical concerns are something that we're really interested in our writing and that we'll unpack a little bit today when we speak more about TikTok. So it's really no surprise with the popularity of the genre that the genre has proven popular on TikTok, which is a huge social media platform now. And as we can see from the slides here, the hashtag as of kind of late February, early March, when we put these slides together, has 2.2 million posts. And that has the opportunity to reach over 1 billion monthly users. And we see a huge range of material on TikTok, from kind of classic retellings to people like Kendall Ray extending her kind of true crime personality, influencer personality, to more positive representations that we'll talk about later. However, in the mainstream media, what's really been discussed in terms of true crime is the figure of the web sleuth, and then being a potentially problematic and unethical figure of themselves, which Megan's going to speak a little bit more about now.
Yeah, so a really famous case of this, of web sleuths kind of overstepping, is that of Gabby Petito in the US. This happened a few years ago. Gabby Petito was herself a sort of influencer, like aspiring influencer, and she was murdered by her boyfriend. And what happened after Gabby Petito's death, or disappearance actually, was that web sleuths on TikTok and on social media just flooded social media with speculation about what happened to her. And they really sort of muddied the waters of the investigation, and they harmed Gabby's family as well, because there was all this misinformation. But what we're actually going to be talking about today is the ways that social media can be used in positive ways for true crime influencers. And one of those people that we really think is a great example of how TikTok can be used positively is Sarah Turney. Now, Sarah Turney took to TikTok, I think it was in 2020, when she wanted to get more publicity for the case of her sister, who she believes was allegedly murdered by their father, and is still an open case. And she was so successful in that. As you can see, she has 1.2 million followers, that she kind of became a true crime sort of influencer and personality herself. And she began, she has a couple of really successful podcasts herself. One of them is Voices for Justice. And through her TikTok account, she aspires to draw attention to other open cases besides that of her sister. So as we see here, she's talking about the case of Emily Pike, who's a missing Indigenous girl.
What Sarah Turney's really successful at, and others that we'll talk about today, is using the mechanisms of TikTok to promote the story. So she'll use stuff like duets and stitches with other influencers to promote her message. And she'll also use very trendy, memeable content to get her message onto people's For You page and get the most eyes on the message. We can see a great recent example of this with the one here in the New York Times, where she's got the kind of Cilla Black surprise, surprise meme. Now, that's the kind of dark humor there that she's saying, surprise, surprise, her father is suing her over the accusation she's making related to her sister's murder. But in using a kind of meme, what she does is she makes her output more consumable and more interesting to the very young demographic that is on TikTok.
And another example we have here is Celicia Stanton. Celicia Stanton is a Black woman, which is very significant in terms of true crime, because Black women just aren't represented in true crime, quite frankly. True crime has a problem with only covering sort of very specific types of victims. And in the case of Celicia Stanton, she's actually the victim of a financial crime, which is another kind of area that you wouldn't necessarily think that would be true crime, but absolutely is true crime. And one of the points of her TikTok account is to try to expand the definitions of true crime to include all kinds of crime, not just murder and not just involving specific types of victims.
Absolutely. Like Sarah Turney, Stanton's very good at using kind of dance moves, which are obviously very popular on TikTok, to again attract attention, gain a following, and make her posts more relevant. So here we see her use the kind of twerkulator dance move to talk about some of their issues, and really important issues of racism within TikTok, and issues around the kind of voyeuristic and kind of bloodthirsty nature. Also, we see her here with her lovely cat. I don't know the name of her cat, but it's an absolute beauty. And we see, again, cats very popular on social media. And again, she kind of exploits an imperfect platform in order to get more eyes and more coverage on the cases and the issues she's interested in.
And another example of one of the influencers we've looked at is Kara Robinson Chamberlain. Now, Kara Robinson Chamberlain was actually kidnapped by a serial killer and managed to escape. And her story has been covered quite a bit in sort of mainstream popular true crime media. But on her TikTok, she talks about the importance of consent from the people who are actually involved in these stories, in the telling of those stories. So she sort of draws a parallel almost between her own assault and her story being told without her consent.
It's such an important message. And what Chamberlain's kind of presence on the platform proves is that this is a platform which gives a platform. That's too many platforms. This is a social media platform that gives people who wouldn't have a voice in a genre a voice, basically. So someone like Kara Robinson Chamberlain, who is a victim of a horrific attack, wouldn't then be able to potentially get media trained and go to university and get a career as a presenter. But here, with the low threshold nature of true crime, of TikTok true crime, she can in ways unavailable elsewhere. And really, we see this throughout, and we've got other people here who are doing the same thing. Kimberly Corbin, the lady in the middle here, is also a victim of a true crime attack, actually does a podcast with Chamberlain called A Survivor's Guide to True Crime. And again, uses the platform in a way to spread her message, which she wouldn't have the opportunity to otherwise. Equally, the women to the kind of left and right who are part of the Indigenous communities and Indigenous murders aren't covered in the press as much because, as Megan said, many white women, many true crime stories are mainly cover white women. But again, they can have voice here and they can have discussion here. If you want to do some further reading on true crime or anything we've spoken about today, here you go. Otherwise, thanks for joining us and thanks for listening.